difficulties.
That's what it looked like.
Okay, we're live. Give me a second.
Mark, this.
Go ahead, President Johnson.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for January 19th, 2021. Once again, we are coming to you virtually. Hopefully, we'll be able to change that in the not too distant future. For those tuning in and want to follow along with our agenda, you can do so by going to our website, livoniapublicschools.org, highlight over the board tab, and it will open a window that says board information. If you left click on that, a window will open to the lower left and it will say new meeting agendas. If you click on that, you'll be able to find our agenda for this evening and you can follow along. This is the meeting where you will hear more discussion on the items that will ultimately come before the board for a vote. So this is the one, if you want to see a meeting, this is it. This is where we discuss more of the issues. So we'll go ahead and get going. We have item 1, audience communication, and I understand there are no audience communications tonight. Is that right, Mrs. Jenkins?
Let me do one last quick check here on our Google form. And no, we do not have any audience communications that have come through.
Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. That then will take us to item 2, our Committee of the Whole. We have one item, item A, board officer discussion. We did have some discussion at our study session last week, and we did discuss the various offices. Any further discussion on that at this point? I am not seeing any for the benefit of the community. This is next week will be the meeting where we do elect our officers, and if you want to tune in at that time, we'll have nominations and voting during our communications portion. So if there's no further discussion on this item, Mrs. Burton.
Yes, just for those who may not have been aware of the Committee of the Whole, or the study session rather, last week, what we had discussed, Mrs. Bradford expressed interest in serving as secretary. There was discussion about having me serve as president. I'd be happy to do so if that's how our board would like me to serve. And there was discussion about having Mr. Johnson serve as vice president. Discussion was brief, but just so folks in the public who are listening in might be brought up to speed.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. I think that accurately reflects our discussion last week, and as indicated, we will formally have that election next Monday at our voting meeting. If there's nothing else on that item, then we'll go to item 3, our Finance Committee, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Bonifield. Good evening.
Good evening, President Johnson. We have, I believe, one item tonight, out of district schools of choice.
I froze it for a second. Are we ready to go? Sorry. All right. So at this time every year, we get to have a conversation about schools of choice. Schools of Choice is an out-of-district program that's run through the Pupil Accounting Manual. So I've included in your packets board if you want to follow along, and if we have any questions, please go ahead and stop me along the way so that we can address them at that time. So again, School of Choice is run through the Pupil Accounting Manual. There are 2 sections that we utilized in the past. One is Section 105, that's for students who reside within Wayne County. And the other is 105C, and those are the contiguous counties, Macomb, Monroe, Oakland, and Washtenaw, and it will allow those 4 county students to attend under this provision. We currently do this for K-8, and then some of our magnet school programs such as Nigiero, ACAT, NACAT, Global Ed, and Kappa, as well as IB at Franklin. We, as a district, need to identify either the grade level, the class, or the school that would be open. We don't need to identify all, but just one of those. What we have done over the last couple of years is just identify the grade levels, which gives us the most flexibility to determine where the appropriate placements would be and the numbers would be once our in-district students are placed and other transfer requests are granted. We do an announcement, and we run that announcement for 30 days. This gives folks an opportunity to apply. We have a full application process that they need to go through for this. We do not deny any entry based on ability, accomplishments, talents, or any type of disabilities, including special education. What we do have the opportunity, though, is when students are applying for particular magnet schools, they do need to meet those qualifications of those magnet school programs. If we have more students that apply than we have spots available, we utilize a lottery. Students who are residing with other students currently enrolled in LPS through 105 or 105C would have priority in that lottery. So they're pulled out first. And then from there, we have a lottery system that would create a wait list, and we would just move down the wait list as spots become available. Once students are approved, we contact them and have them come in and do our registration process like we would register any other student. If a student is coming to us through 105C, so again, those two contiguous counties, and they have special education services, we need to have an agreement with that sending district regarding special education costs before they're able to enroll with us. As a district, we receive the lesser of the two foundation allowances between the two districts. So whether that's our foundation allowance or a lesser foundation allowance or a greater foundation allowance. So if it's coming from a school district that has a higher foundation allowance, we would get ours. If it's a district that has a lower foundation allowance than ours, we would get the sending district's foundation allowance for the year. We have run this program since 2014, 2015. We started off by just having 50 seats, and we've moved up into the last year, we offered up to 195 seats. And again, I say up to because we probably will not be able to fill all of them, although we want to have that flexibility should the opportunity or need arise. So again, we're coming to you with a request and recommendation for next year that we would like to see any discussion today, as well as be part of the actual regular board meeting next week. And that would be to again offer 195 seats in grades K-8 across the district, as well. That would include 5 seats of Kappa and 5 seats of Global Ed. So really the K-8 portion is 185 plus 5 at each of those magnet school programs for the 9th grade level only. With that, if you have any questions or wish to have any further discussion, be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does anybody have any questions? Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. Keith, is there any consideration for families who already have a student in our program through Schools of Choice?
Yes, it has to be through Schools of Choice. So if they're a student, if they reside, and the way the manual is written, if they reside with a student who currently attends LPS through out-of-district School of Choice, through Section 105 or 105C, they would have priority. If they reside with somebody who, however this would work, but are actually just in the district as a regular student, so sometimes you have split families that could occur, they do not get priority. It has to be registered through 105 or 105C.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes, and just for the benefit of the public who may not have followed these discussions over the last several years, at this time of year, we typically address this. This is in an effort to offset some of our declining enrollment that is due primarily to lower birth rate now than has been in previous years. If we just take our seniors minus our our kindergartners. We always have, for the last many, many years, as we have fewer incoming kindergartners than we do graduating seniors. That's not unique to Livonia Public Schools. That's consistent with within the state of Michigan and frankly nationwide. We just have a bit of a declining birth rate, and we have for many years. So this is in an effort to fill some of those seats in order to continue to offer the programs that we offer to all of the students in Livonia Public Schools. And just so everyone understands, this is a very limited schools of choice. It is not an open door, come one, come all. This is a very limited schools of choice where we might have some pockets in given classrooms that we could have a few students fill some of those seats that would otherwise go unfilled, and therefore programs may need to be cut.
President Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. Keith, I have a couple of questions, and I'm not sure if I understood your answer to Mrs. Jarvis's question. You mentioned split families. What do you mean by a split family?
The typical situation where this occurs would be a family that resides in LPS currently, and they move out of district. They would actually have to apply through school of choice, but they wouldn't have priority because they had attended here the previous year. So the student priority is only if the student is currently attending under 105 or 105C.
Let me
Okay.
give an example of when that might happen. For instance, we have several hundred students who are part of Livonia Public Schools through our Act 18 center programs. And so we may have a family whose child is a student in Livonia Public Schools, and they may have a sibling who is applying for limited schools of choice, for out-of-district schools of choice. In that case, they would not have priority as a sibling because their sibling is not attending under the limited schools of choice provision. They're attending as an Act 18 student. So the law intends for a family who has already entered your district via 105 or 105C allowances, that if they have a sibling, those students are given priority if you have openings at that grade level. You would take those students in before you would go through a lottery process.
Okay, then my next question is, if you have a scenario where parents are divorced and one parent has custody of one sibling and another parent has custody of the other sibling, one of the siblings is already in our district through the schools of choice, but the other sibling doesn't reside with that sibling, but wants to apply. Does that other sibling get preferential treatment because he's not? You're shaking your head. So good. Is that because they're not residing in the same household?
That's correct.
Okay. So it's not necessarily the sibling. They have to be in the same household.
Correct. In the past, it's been referred to as a sibling role, and it's not a sibling role. It's really residing in the home of somebody coming in through 105, 105C. So take two families that have now joined. They're not siblings. They may be steps, brothers and sisters, but they're not siblings. They would, if they attended the other family attended through 105 or 105C the previous year, the new family now that's joining them in that residence could attend or could have priority the following year.
Okay. Last question. Do we know exactly how many students we have that are in through school of choice?
I can get you that information. I want to say it was last I looked, I believe it was around 500.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing else.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes, and again, for the public to understand, once a student comes in through schools of choice, they may stay in Livonia Public Schools for the remainder of their school career through senior year, provided they do not voluntarily leave the district, such as move or opt not to come in the following year. But as long as they stay in the district, they will stay as a Livonia Public School student for the remainder of their school years.
That's correct. If a student breaks enrollment with us, even for a week, because they wanted to try homeschooling, for example, they can no longer register. They'd have to go back through the school of choice process, application
Okay.
process.
So, Mr. McDonald, the 500 students you're referring to, that is a cumulative number of students over the last several years that have come into our district.
That's correct, and that's my guess right now. But I can definitely go back and work with Kathy Hayes on finding the exact number for you.
Okay. Okay. And Mr. McDonald, also last year we opened up for 185 students. Granted, that was right in the middle of when COVID was beginning to rear its ugly head in our world, which messed up a lot of things. But that 185, actually 195 spots, if we include Kappa and Global Ed, of that, we actually wound up enrolling about 110 or so students. Is that right?
100 students, which is a little over 50%, which is revenue over 800,000 for us. Given what we were dealing with at the time, it actually, when we went out on March 12th, that was the middle of our application window. So we had to have a pause, try to republicize that, change our process for application. And so we had a little bit decrease in the number of applications, partly, I would say, largely due to the onset of COVID at the time, but we were still able to register 100 students for this school year.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Jarvis, you have your hand raised? No, okay. Anybody else? I don't see everybody. Is there anybody else that has any questions? Shout out. Okay, that would end item 3A, out of district school of choice, and that will complete the finance committee.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonifield. That will then take us to item 4, our building and site committee, and I will turn it over to Mr. Centers, our chair.
All right, we have one item this evening. It's a bond discussion, and I believe that Mr. Francis and Ms. Smith are going to lead us in that discussion tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Bringing my friends with me. Mrs. Oquist is going to join in as well. I'm actually going to turn it over to Allison to lead it off. We've gone through this presentation with the board on a number of occasions and had a conversation about the 2021 bond proposal again on a number of occasions. But we want to go through it again tonight with you and let the community and those who view see the presentation. Allison's sharing her screen right now, and we've got these slides divvied up, and we'll just get the ball rolling. And if you guys have questions as we're moving along, feel free to jump in and interrupt us, or you can wait to the end. It's completely up to you.
And also, as I'm presenting, I don't see you. So if you do have your hand raised, feel free to, as Phil said, just to jump right in. So to start us off, I thought it would be helpful just to give folks a background of how schools are funded to better understand why we're bringing a bond proposal forward. And so as just a reminder, our schools are funded based on a proposal that went before the community back in 1994. We refer to as Proposal A, and that established a per pupil funding amount that districts receive based on the number of students in our district. The key objectives of Proposal A were to reduce property taxes, and it was also meant to reduce the per pupil funding disparities across districts. There was a large gap between what some districts were getting and what others were getting. So Proposal A did accomplish that goal, but a few things that I want to point out. Number one, that Proposal A was never actually calibrated to the actual cost of educating a child. It wasn't research-based how they came up with it. It was, they had a certain pot of money that they estimated bringing in. They divided that by how many students were in the state, and then that's how they came up with the dollar amount. So there has been a research study completed, the School Finance Research Collaborative, that did go through the exercise of researching, what staff are needed and what supports are needed for students, and they came up with what an average what the average funding should be per pupil. So I wanted to make that note, and then also that Proposal A didn't address school facilities, which are funded exclusively by local property taxes. Again, that didn't factor in when they were coming up how much to give each district. So because it doesn't address school facilities, school districts really have two mechanisms for securing funds for facility needs. First, they can levy a sinking fund, and they also have the option of requesting a bond and selling bonds. So I'll go over for you just a reminder of what a sinking fund millage can be used for and how it's being used here in LPS. So the sinking fund can be used for the continual upkeep of school buildings, facilities, and surrounding school sites, such as parking lots and playgrounds. It cannot be used for operational costs. We can't use it to pay for staff salaries. We can't use it for instructional supplies or textbooks. It's got a very specific use that it can be used for. It is used as a pay-as-you-go basis, so the money isn't all received up front. You know, it's just received as the taxes are collected from the taxpayers. We've had a history of successful passage of sinking fund requests by the community. It goes back to all the way back to 1995. We've had one in place. In August 2019, we went to the community once again for a renewal of a 10-year sinking fund, and they approved 1.6 mils, which brings in approximately $7 million of funding per year. And as we'll go over in the presentation, we knew when we were going out for the sinking fund that this wouldn't address all of our facility needs, but it was a nice way to put in some long-term funding that would help a portion of our facility needs. We're largely using the sinking fund for a few main projects, paving, boilers, and roofs. And with the passage of this new sinking fund in 2019, we now have the ability to use it for instructional technology as well. So we just brought our first purchase to the board in, I believe it was September, for some additional mobile devices for our students. That was partially funded with some remaining dollars from the 2013 bond, but we also supplemented it with our sinking fund. School districts also have the opportunity to go before their community and request permission to sell bonds. And just like the sinking fund, there's specific purposes for how these funds can be used. An external auditor does have to come in and they audit these funds to make sure they're being used as they were intended. Unlike the sinking fund, we are borrowing money, which allows us to tackle some large scale projects immediately and then pay back that money over time. In May of 2013, the LPS community did approve a $195 million bond, which allowed us to address a number of needs across the district. And we wanted to spend some time reminding the community what we were able to accomplish through the 2013 bond. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Francis to get us started on that.
Thank you, Allison. Let's take a little look at the history here. Going back to the 2013 bond, we were able to do quite a bit of scope in our of work with that $195 million. But as those on this board in the district and in the community would recall, that the need was much larger than what we actually were able to accomplish with that 2013 bond. But taking a look back at that scope, you can see that we tackled a variety of projects in many areas. So we have the safety and security upgrades that we basically had, I shouldn't say basically because it was a very big change, the security cameras, exterior, interior, and the real big piece was those secure vestibules and having card reader access, etc. We built 3 state-of-the-art, beautiful performing arts centers at our 3 high schools. 2 from the ground up at Franklin and Stevenson, and Churchill's was taken down to an unrecognizable state and rebuilt back. And all 3 of them are absolutely beautiful. The sound is impressive, and it's certainly a jewel for Livonia Public Schools. In IT, we had many needs that we accomplished with the 2013 bond, and not the least of which were simply to get Wi-Fi in our district, which we did not have before this initiative. We purchased mobile devices. We purchased desktop computers. We upgraded our network, purchased new servers, changed the phone system, had all kinds of infrastructure as well as classroom technology such as the interactive whiteboards, those projectors and whiteboards. We have the document cameras, the sound systems in each classroom with the microphone sound system all set together and wired together, the PA systems. It's an incredible amount that we were able to accomplish. But once you start purchasing information technology items, you have to continually upgrade and replace them as we go along. So we're now at the stage of it doing replacement cycles. But that was a great accomplishment from the 2013 bond. The lion's share of those dollars certainly went to facility improvements, and that's a pretty large umbrella of a statement. But we remodeled all of our school buildings. We did signage, we did classrooms, we did floor to ceiling, lighting, walls, flooring. We did the infrastructure that it required, toilet rooms, fire alarms, safety alarms, generators, emergency generators at all of our schools, and all the windows at our schools, doors and the hardware that go with them, just a myriad of items, temperature controls placed on our new HVAC systems, which gave us more efficient use of those new systems. So just a really, really great and visible upgrade, as well as items that are sort of behind the surface that people don't see. Very, very important. We bought buses and maintenance equipment through the 2013 bond. So we retired many old buses and exchanged them out for newer diesel buses and some gasoline powered buses. And of course, we also purchased furniture and instructional equipment. We were able to get student furniture throughout the district. We were able to pick up flexible furniture. School buildings had the ability to, the staff and administrative team had the opportunity to purchase flexible furniture unique to each building to use for common spaces or lobby areas, etc., as they saw a need for. And we also had purchased cafeteria tables and musical instruments, science equipment. So we really tackled a very large portion of the need that we had with that 2013 bond. And proud to have done it, thankful to the community for helping us do it, and we're very excited about that, but the work does continue. Here's some pictures. I've got a few slides here. I'm not going to go through every single picture. It's just sort of a walk down memory lane here and reminiscing on some of these. You see pictures of our performing arts centers. You see pictures of classrooms. The main office there at Churchill as an example. Beautiful new office for the students and community and parents to enter into. The PACs for all three high schools you see in front of you right now. And do we have another picture in there? Oh, I can't believe I didn't talk a couple minutes ago about the playground structures. This is an example of one of the playground structures that our K-6 buildings were able to re-equip during that bond. And you see some other flexible furniture that schools purchased, and of course, a couple of the new buses. So just the impact, and I've sort of talked about these things. This just summarizes it for everyone who's watching. There is such a positive impact on the learning environment. Our students, our instructional staff, our support staff, drivers, custodial, secretaries, principals, teachers, so many people on staff, as well as all of our students and families really affected by so many of the items from the 2013 bonds, from something as small as a music instrument to as large as a performing arts center, or something as unseen as electrical service and HVAC systems. and plenty of classroom technology. So you can see that we just want to notate what we set out to do with the 2013 bond was accomplished. We knew that we weren't going to be able to tackle everything with the 2013 bond, but what we decided to tackle, we did in fact accomplish, and we're incredibly proud of those accomplishments. So these are some of the items that when we go back 8, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, in preparation for that bond, back in the early 2011 time period, 2012, the district did a full facility just a facility assessment of everything. And we had different groups from different areas, staff, the board dug into it, community, etc. And we found a great need that the district had, because we had not done a large bond like that in many years. I believe it was approximately 20 years. So some of the items that we knew we couldn't accomplish and tackle with the 2013 bond, you see in front of you. We knew we couldn't get to the media centers and some of the ancillary rooms in the buildings. We could not afford at the time district-wide air conditioning. The computer lab spaces, while they did get new desktops, the facility itself was not redone. Science lab casework and tables, if you walk through those, you'll note that there's still original equipment in many of our schools. The kitchens and serving lines, we knew we could not get to with the last bond, as well as the high school field houses, competition gyms, locker rooms, and the pools and locker rooms. We knew all of this was a need, but we were unable to fit it into the last bond.
So I'm going to just pause for a moment there before could we go back to that prior slide, Mrs. Smith? So one of the reasons why we wanted to take that quick look back is as we take a look at moving forward with a recommendation for another bond proposal this year in 2021, we thought it was important to really look back on 2 items. One, that in the comprehensive needs assessment that was done in 2011 and 2012 in the facility forums, there were many needs identified. And I know those of you who sat on the board at that time and those of us who were on the administrative team at that time certainly remember that the need was closer to the 260, 270 plus range of need. And at that time, the board, the administration had extensive discussion. For those of you that remember back to those meetings, looking at the list in its entirety, all of those needs existed within our schools that were 50 to 60 years old and had not undergone significant renovation. So at that time, the board made a careful and wise decision to really bring forth a request for a bond issue that they thought was both significant but also responsible. And so the request at that time was for $195 million. And as you see from that retrospective that Mr. Francis took us through, there was a great deal accomplished. There is so much to be proud of. And now what we're looking forward to is really finishing what we started with that 2013 bond and looking forward with an eye to the future of some additional projects that we'd like to complete. So you will hear us. These are items that were identified at that time. We reminded you of them in 2019. If you remember, in December of 2019, we officially closed out the bond and did a comprehensive presentation to the board at that time. And we have Mr. Terrell from Plant Moran Cressa on the meeting with us this evening, and he was there back with us in 2019 as we took a look back through at the prior 6 years of work. And so as we know, there's still needs that exist, and we continue to identify those going forward. So that really sets us forth for where we're headed next. So recently, we've had an opportunity to take a look at bond issues of neighboring districts. And so one of the things that we took a look at was the window of opportunity to be able to consider a new bond issue without raising taxes. So again, to look at a bond issue in 2021 that would allow us to maintain our current tax levy, so no new taxes for our community, but allow us to recapture dollars in a bond issue as many other districts around us have done. Again, in an effort to remain very current, very future forward, updating their technology, their facilities, and all of their learning environments. And so I'll highlight just a few. You take a look at Novi Community Schools, went out for a bond in 2014 for 75 million, and then again in 2019 for 185 million. Plymouth Canton, one of our neighboring districts who we work closely with on many things, 2013 bond of 114 million, and then recently a 2019 bond was passed for 275 million. South Lyon, 2015 bond, and then just recently a 2020 bond. And so when you look at, again, many of the neighboring districts around us, one of the things we took a look at were some of those patterns of when districts were going out for their bond issue and taking advantage of that window of opportunity to maintain a consistent tax levy, maintain a consistent rate for their community, but be able to continue to make that important reinvestment in our schools and in our students. So as we take a look at bond election statistics, we really hone in on school bond proposals that have taken place over the last couple of years with no millage increase. And so as you will see, the passage rate on average, as you take a look at the past 5 years, and we've captured so that you can actually read it on the screen, just the past couple of years, the average over the past several years is approximately 92% passage rate for bond proposals where there is no millage increase. So again, as we take a look at, Mr. Francis, are you going to cover the 10-year facility assessment?
I will. Yeah, I am. Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
But you feel free to jump in whenever you want to.
Thank you.
This is near impossible to see, if not completely impossible to actually make out the numbers. But that's not the important part of this. The point of it is to talk about going back for a moment when Mrs. Oquist said that we had done extensive facility assessments, and I mentioned the same thing in preparation for the 2013 bond. We have maintained that facility assessment through these years, partnering with Plant Marie and Cressa, Paul, who's with us on the call today, myself, folks from my department. We sit down for hours on end over a couple of days, and we do that twice a year, and we update this facility assessment. This is our guide. This is our responsibility to make sure that we stay on top of what do we know we need, so we can say with surety and confidence that we have work that needs to be done, and this is the priority of that work. So all that you're seeing here is a snapshot on this slide of a summary page, but we have page after page of tab after tab of each building covering a myriad of topics. Thank you, Allison. These are just some of the items that are on every tab for every building in that document. We look at when's the last time the paving was done, how long until we believe, based upon how it was redone, if it was done recently, it will last. If it is a partial of a school, for example, a large high school has multiple parking lots, we will break it down with the square footage that may have been done recently. Say, as an example, at Churchill, we recently did the west lot, but the east lot was not done. So we have two different figures in those square footage areas. We have ceilings, roofs, plumbing systems that we look at, water mains, the doors, the door hardware, the flooring, all these items. We mark down the need, the approximate cost, and we escalate that cost based upon how far out into the future we believe it may need to be replaced over the next 10 years. And as an example of something that would not need to be replaced over the next 10 years, we're currently replacing roofs at our school buildings and other buildings in the district. If we've recently replaced that roof, we're expecting a 25-year life out of that. So it won't show up on our 10-year facility assessment as a need, but it will be noted what was done, when it was done, how large of a roof it was, so that if this passes on to other hands in the future, they have that data. And we are committed to maintaining this 10-year facility assessment as we continue forward. Out of that facility need, and if you could read any numbers that was on that last slide, you'd see that in our upcoming 0 to 3 year section, it totals out to $102 million of needed projects. So those are in the immediate future for us. Those are the things that we would say we need to start planning to do this work. And then in the 4 to 6 year range, we have another $108 million need that we have assessed will be coming due in that time frame. And the identified technology needs are just under 30 million. Altogether, that's $239 million. That's identified need over the next 6 years. Now, some of that is being handled by that sinking fund. Allison talked about that earlier. We have that $7 million a year sinking fund that we bring in. That's great money that we bring in to do different jobs, and we dedicate that to things like the paving, the roofs, the boilers. If we have an emergency repair, we use that sinking fund, but not getting it in a very large sum at one time like a bond. We have to spread those projects out and can only take those bite-sized pieces each summer in our projects, but that is factored in. When you subtract out that $42 million from our current need over the next 6 years, we come up with $197 million of additional funding that is required in order to take care of what we see as a critical need.
So I'm going to take just a few minutes to take us back through some essential considerations that, as you know, as a board and administrative team, we have talked about this now for several months. It is something that even in the face of the many things going on and impacting us via the pandemic, we've discussed how important it is that we continue to keep one eye on the future at all times, because as we move forward, we don't want to lose the opportunity to continue the all-important investment we have made over the past several years, and that we need to continue to make going forward to continue to be a leader in education. So the first piece that we've talked about on a number of occasions is really the district's strong fiscal stewardship. And this has been identified not only within the district, but from outside organizations as well. Recently, we were able to refund our bond debt, resulting in a savings to our taxpayers of over $15 million. We've seen really consistent growth of our district fund balance, which has provided a high level of financial stability. It's allowed us to restore essential programming and also add additional programming for our students and opportunities. And it has really earned us a more positive bond rating. And continually, our financial department, led by Mrs. Smith, continues to receive the highest rating on our district audits. And we share that because I know that's something in which the board takes tremendous pride and also has extraordinarily high expectations with regard to our fiscal stewardship. And so certainly we never come before the community lightly as we began to discuss this, or as we've discussed it over the past several months. The second piece is really one of those slides to which we referred earlier and that we've had considerable discussion, taking a look at bond issues in neighboring communities and the projects that they have been able to do, and really taking a look at our offerings within the district and being certain that we can continue to keep an eye moving forward with growth, innovation, and excellence in mind. We really look at that for both the retention and recruitment of students to really have Livonia remain a destination district for our families and for our community. Finally, and I think really essential to this for the board, is that this is a window of opportunity for a no new taxes bond. And this window of opportunity exists in May of 2021. That window then closes after that point in time. And so we have the ability to request a 20-year term, $186 million bond issue without any increase in taxes. So the tax rate levy would remain the same for residents and for businesses, while still maintaining a significant reinvestment in our community. That is beneficial to everyone. That's beneficial to our families, to our community and civic partners, to our businesses. And again, May is the only window of opportunity we have for a no new taxes bond issue. I know that's something that has been very important to our board and certainly an important part of our recommendation to you this evening. So what projects would we be doing with this bond? This is really the part where we are very excited to continue this conversation. And again, we know because we are a district that has maintained an extensive long-term facility plan, 10 years out on an ongoing basis. Again, a significant amount of time and effort goes into that, but what it allows us to do is be ready for opportunities such as this when they come up. And so we, through that current needs assessment, have really identified those remaining projects from the needs assessment we did for the 2013 bond issue. Many of these are going to look familiar because we just shared them in a prior slide. But a few of the key pieces, and I won't go through every last detail because, as you know, that's what we would spend the next several months doing, is honing in on these specific projects. But redesigning and reimagining our media centers is an exciting element of this bond issue. This was an area that we had not planned to do as part of the last bond. Those had been more recently updated at the time, and the determination was made that on the priority list at that time, there were other things that really superseded it. However, it really is an opportunity to look at 21st century media centers and what the learner of today needs, how they collaborate with other students, how a teacher utilizes and infuses technology, how our media specialists are able to work in collaboration with classroom teachers in those areas. So that's one significant hallmark of the proposed bond issue. The second is a real necessity because we are dealing with, for the most part, kitchens and serving lines in each of our schools that are original to the buildings. So again, for the most part, 50 to 60-year-old facilities. And again, as we've changed some of the food and some of the offerings for our students, we'd like to be able to continue to grow in that area and what we're able to provide on site that's fresh and prepared. So to do that, we really need to do some updating in our kitchens and in our serving lines. This next one we know is something that comes up on a very regular basis from our families, from our students, and from our staff, is the need for air conditioning in all of our classrooms, labs, and offices. So it may come as a surprise to some in our community that we do not have air conditioning in our schools. So there are very limited areas of the schools that have air conditioning. And for many weeks of the year, both in the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, our classrooms can get quite uncomfortable, and our students are in those classrooms for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and really to have those be optimal learning environments for our students, we really are looking at that enhanced air quality through our HVAC systems and the addition of air conditioning throughout the schools. And then finally, for this section, continuing those facility improvements. You saw on the chart of the last, as we looked at the last bond, this was a huge encumbrance throughout the process through our last bond issue. And that was, again, anything from electrical and plumbing to doors and hardware, restrooms, etc. Many of those areas were done, but there were many that were not. And so what we'd like to do is go back around and, again, finish what we started with our last bond and be able to address some of those ongoing needs or needs that were not addressed initially. The second section focuses on really maintaining and enhancing our investment. As we've shared, Livonia Public Schools utilizes over 3 million square feet of property and maintains over 700 acres. So there is a need, just like with our home, but on a much larger scale, for a continued reinvestment in that investment. So technology will continue to always be a priority for mobile devices for students, our classroom presentation technology, as well as many of the other, both behind the scenes as well as materials that we utilize on a daily basis as part of our instruction in the classroom. A second portion is continuing our work in our athletic areas, in the field houses, the pools and annexes, in tennis courts, our middle school gymnasium floors. We also have a need for additional furniture and instructional equipment. We were able to bite off quite a big chunk in our last bond. We still have some significant furniture and instructional equipment needs, as well as school buses and maintenance equipment. Looking at security enhancements, we have the need to add additional security cameras, both interior and exterior, to our schools, as well as some additional elements like the card reader access on different doors for access, safe access to our schools throughout the district. And then finally, for this section, is revisiting the elementary playgrounds. We were able to begin that process over the past few years. It was a wonderful addition, really not only for our students and our schools, but for the community as a whole. We have grandparents taking grandchildren. We have, pre-K students that are pre-K coming in and utilizing those playgrounds. And that's been really a very nice element in addition for our community as well. And then finally, a piece we're really excited about, in addition to the ones we've already mentioned, is really that opportunity to innovate and explore new opportunities for our district. We'd like to continue our focus on our Project Lead the Way and our STEM pathway opportunities. We'd like to create a permanent home for robotics, which has continued to grow and thrive in Livonia Public Schools. One of the other things that we've discussed a number of times is the opportunity to take a look at creating a very welcoming, joyful, and state-of-the-art early childhood center that can be expanded to fit the needs of our community. And then finally, looking at LCTC or career technical education enhancements. Taking a look at the offerings at the Career Center, there are a couple of our most popular offerings where the needs for the facility we would need that to expand and grow a bit, and taking a look at the offerings we currently have and whether or not there are additional offerings that we want to consider. And so all of those areas, really from early childhood all the way up through the secondary element in preparing students to be college and career ready, we are excited about opportunities to think future forward on some of those elements, which we think would be an outstanding enhancement for our community. And then finally, I'll close with the official ballot language that we have reviewed at our last meeting and share it again with you. I'll just go ahead and let you take a moment to read that on the screen, and then we'll have a short discussion about this element. So as you may recall, there were a couple of things that the board asked us about and that we were able to accommodate in working with our attorney. And that was to take a look at the wording on the bullets so that they're as clear as possible, but also utilizing the required language as provided by our state. And so we've started with the educational technology piece. The second is furnishing, equipping, and erecting additions to and remodeling, furnishing, and refurnishing school facilities. The second piece talks about improving playgrounds and athletic facilities. The fourth bullet, purchasing buses. And then the fifth is really another wide-ranging, preparing, developing, and improving sites. So of course, this only provides a limited picture, and ballot language is intended to be a neutral, clear, focused statement on what you are asking from your community. And the informational campaign and the information we would share with our community over the next several weeks and several months would go into much more detail about what we would be utilizing the bond funds for throughout the next several years. But this would be the specific ballot language. The other change you'll see under the bold statement, it starts with the estimated millage that will be levied for the proposed bonds is a 0 mil net increase over the prior year levy. So that was something we had discussed as well. So it will state very clearly at the start that it is a 0 mil increase, and that the bond levy would remain as it is currently at 1.37 mils. So at this point, that is all the information we have to share, and we would go back to our normal format so that we can spend some time with you and preparing to bring this as a recommendation at the regular board meeting next week.
It's difficult to see everyone in the grid view, so if you have a question or a comment, I'm going to invite you to go ahead and jump in.
Mr. Centers?
Yep, Mrs. Byrne.
I am thrilled that we have this opportunity in front of us to propose to our community a no new tax increase bond that will still continue to bring in the number of dollars that we need to not only continue the good work that we were able to accomplish through our last bond, but also look at some exciting things like possible expansion of our Career Technical Center, early childhood, which always has a wait list. We can never seem to meet the high demand for our early childhood learners, and put a whole lot of extra things into our buildings and our facilities that we were never able to fit into our list for the previous bond. The public may not be aware, but for example, when we say furniture, we were able to replace a lot of the furniture for our students in our last bond. But we knew from the outset that we wouldn't be able to do all of it. Our staff said with resounding message, forego our furniture, make sure we have all the students' furniture in. So when you go into our classrooms right now, our student furniture is fabulous. And our staff furniture across the whole district is still the furniture that has been from some decades ago. So there are so many things that are in our buildings that look so much better than they did prior to our big 2013 bond, but there's still work to be done. So if we can accomplish the next chunks of improvements for our school district and have cost no new additional money for our taxpayers, and no new tax increase, I think that is just a win-win for our students and our staff, our parents, and our community. So I'm thrilled to be supportive of this bond.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. I too am excited to move forward with this. I think it picks up sort of where we left off with the 2013 bond. And Mrs. Smith, you mentioned audits of the 2013 bond that it's done every year. How have we done on those audits?
We have, they've been no findings, and the auditors are able to give the highest level of assurance that our statements are free of any material misstatements. They check too, they look at what, the Treasury says, what our ballot language said was the allowable uses of those funds, and then they pull invoices and make sure that everything does align with what we said that we were going to use that money for. So we've actually gone kind of above and beyond too with the audit. We have actually two firms that are auditing the sinking fund and the bond. We have Plant Moran that we've used for a number of years, and we also use Yo and Yo to specifically come in and audit our sinking fund and the bond. So we've got two sets of external auditors looking at our books that can assure the board and our community that the district has the procedures in place to safeguard the funds, and again to ensure that they're being used as they said they were going to be used.
And this proposed bond is a 20-year bond as opposed to the 30-year bond that we had in 2013. Is that correct?
That's something, we continue to look at for opportunities for savings for our community. I think we touched upon it earlier tonight. The bond that we did in 2013 was a 30-year term, and it was the right decision at the time. We had a long, gap between the last bond before that, and we really did need those dollars to accomplish what we were able to. And this, we were looking to try to be as good stewards as possible. So we looked at going for a shorter term, and with a shorter term, there's less borrowing costs. And so we're able to save some money going with the 20-year term for this bond.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Francis, some people may look and say, well, you spent a lot of money on the 2013 bond. Why didn't you do everything that we could do? And as Mrs. Oquist indicated, when we talked about the 2013 bond, our wish list was closer to 300 million of what the things that we wanted to do. But can you just remind the community the enormity of the facilities that we have to take care of?
Yeah, we have 3 million square feet. We have 10 elementary schools, 3 upper elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 3 high schools. We have other buildings that we own, operate, and use. We have the Garfield Community School. We have the Livonia Career Technical Center. We have the Jackson Early Childhood Center. We have quite a bit, and it is difficult to wrap your brain around when you say, I need to exchange a door. When you think of your home, you say, well, I got a couple of doors in my home. Yeah, it's going to cost me a few bucks, but we've got thousands of doors across the district that if that was an issue, or we have, just so many square feet of floors and so many miles of pipes that it just ends up becoming a very large number that becomes difficult for me as a homeowner who thinks about doing work to my own home. It just doesn't extrapolate well until you get a handle and wrap your brain around the enormity of the size of Livonia Public Schools.
Great. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that people understood just how big our facilities are and what we're responsible for. The last question I have is, we're talking about school buses, and we did buy school buses with the 2013 bond. Can you just sort of explain the need for additional buses at this time?
Sure. We have a fleet of about 110 buses, and if my memory serves me correct, we were able to replace about 66 through the last bond, and we did that over a number of years so that they weren't all going to be needing to be replaced at the same time. Since that, too, we have continued to look for opportunities through grant funding to purchase additional buses, and so we've brought some bus purchases to the board over the last few years, and we've been able to do 10 buses here, maybe 11 buses. And the last round, we actually purchased some propane buses, and we're able to get a 40% kick in from a grant, so that it was only a 60% cost to the district. But with that said, those first buses are now going on 8 years old, and
Mhm.
they get a lot of wear and tear on these Michigan roads with the salt. Our transportation department does a fantastic job maintaining them. We get every mile out of them that we can. So that they're definitely being maintained well, but there becomes a time when we'd be wise to look to sell those buses, maybe get a little bit of money back from them, and then replace them with newer buses so that we have this continual replacement of the fleet. You know, the problem we ran into with the 2013 bond was, again, we had gotten every last mile out of those old buses, and we had a large number that needed to be replaced. So what we're looking to do now is get on that regular replacement cycle, so that, again, we won't be faced with a large number of buses needing to be replaced all at once. So that's what we would look to do with this 2021 bond, is, again, looking to get some of those buses that were first purchased, you know, with the 2013 bond, looking to replace those with some newer buses. And we'll, again, continue to research and seek out any kind of grant funding we can get too. But it would be nice to, again, to set aside some of these bond proceeds so that we can augment that. We can not have to use the general fund for that and use our bond funds for the bus replacement.
And President Johnson, if I could just piggyback on what was just said, we have to remember, and we, the community, if the community passes, if the board passes the resolution next week, and if this passes at the ballot box of the community, this isn't going to be expended in 2021 and in its entirety. This goes over many years. So like we were just talking about the 2013 bond, we were doing work with the quote unquote 2013 bond in 2019 at a building. So these replacement cycles actually kick back quite a ways. When we talk about technology, we talk about buses, we talk about any of that work. By the time we get to the end, again, if this is through and we are fortunate enough to have these bond dollars to do this work, this will be done over multiple years. And suddenly we're going to be out in years like 2026, 2027. Now we're looking at pushing 15 years from that previous bond. So just a reminder to the community, these things don't get purchased the next day. We're talking about replacing buses again in a methodical, logical manner so that we have them broken up and they don't all go out at one time. And same with the replacement cycles for IT. You do them in these replacement cycles. So we want to make sure that we're protecting our investment and getting the use out of them.
Great, and I know Mrs. Smith and the rest of the cabinet is always looking for grants that will help us purchase additional items. And as a board, we appreciate all of the work that you put in. And I know Mr. Terrio and his group have led us through the 2013 bond and did just an outstanding job. So I want to thank you, Paul, for all your efforts and work that you guys did. So I'm excited to see this bond move forward, and I'm certainly in support of it. So thank you, Mr. Centers.
Great. Anyone else like to make some comments? Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. I would appreciate it if Mr. Francis would review again the differences between the bond and the sinking fund, what they cover and how they cover it. Also addressing what would happen if we did some of these changes from sinking fund dollars, but then we had a sudden roof leak or some other emergency we had to address.
Sure, I'll say a little bit, and Allison, if you want to follow anything up, please feel free, or Andrea, please jump in. But the sinking fund and sinking fund dollars and bond dollars, from a use standpoint, look very, very similar. They're closely related in what you can and cannot do with them. Mrs. Smith talked earlier this evening when we started our presentation about sinking fund dollars and bond dollars cannot be used on salaries, cannot be used on textbooks, on certain, there's very specific rules. You can buy a school bus with bond dollars, but you cannot buy a maintenance vehicle like a plow truck with those same dollars. So we follow those rules, and they are all laid out essentially for these types of projects, these larger projects, these repair, replace, rebuild or build from scratch. Those are all pretty much the large umbrella of them. With regard to the way we spend the sinking fund, we bring those dollars in, knowing what comes in each year is very important to us, so we can allocate it towards what we have on that 10-year facility plan. We have pulled from that 10-year facility plan a few large projects, such as the roofs, the boilers, and the paving. We say that all the time, but we absolutely have one eye on any other items. If we had a water main break, we would address that immediately. We have dollars for the emergency use of it as well. We have had smaller roof issues that aren't the replacement cycle, but rather a roof repair. We would come in and use something like the sinking fund. So we certainly keep one eye on that budget with regard to emergency, and one eye on our planned projects with that sinking fund. Did you want to add anything, Allison or Andrea?
Just to tap in again, and one of the benefits of the bond and why we're going now too is the flexibility that gives us. With the 2013 bond, we were able to accomplish, get to all of our buildings over a 6-year period. If we're relying on the sinking fund, just because of how much is coming in, I mean, that would take well over a decade to like get over to all the buildings. And even then we wouldn't be loving enough to do the things. We wouldn't be able to do the media centers and to do the different projects that we've outlined tonight. So again, that's nice in that we get the money up front. Then we can engage a construction manager and kind of tackle a number of projects over a summer, unlike what we're able to do with the sinking fund. So that's definitely one of the differences.
The only thing I would add is, as we took a look at that, and it really combines a bit with Mr. Johnson, President Johnson's question with regard to the term of the bond. As the board knows, and we did not have in the presentation, so I want to be sure that we're mentioning that we had the opportunity to look at anywhere from a 10-year bond all the way up to a 30-year bond. And we certainly could have gone for a longer term bond of 25 years or 30 years. Which is certainly something that's allowable and acceptable within the industry, that would have garnered closer to $210 or $220 million. So those were considerations that we made. We also took a look at the 15-year bond. So as we look at that for our community, we really did match the long-term facility assessment along with that all-important aspect of being good fiscal stewards, and landed on the recommendation for the 20-year term at $186 million. So while all of those options would have still been no new taxes, we would have incurred additional costs through the interest rates. And so again, you saw the ultimate need and where the dollars are. We're very closely matched with that, with the 186 million, but easily could have certainly had rationale for the 210, 220 million just as easily. However, again, I think it's certainly the board's intent as well as our administration's intent to balance matching the need with good fiscal stewardship.
All right, great. Anyone else? I can only see a handful of the board members, so if someone else wants to go ahead and just hop in.
Okay, I'll go ahead, Mr. Centers, Madeline Acosta. I just wanted to say that we recognize that there are families in our community that are impacted financially by the pandemic. And knowing this, when we're looking at this May 2021 bond, we're excited to have an opportunity to meet financial needs of our facilities and kind of not increase the tax impact on our community. And so maybe is there a way to explain, if we are not able to jump on this bond at this moment, how would this impact the community moving forward?
Well, definitely just to start, I think with those projects that we looked at, it would be going back and prioritizing those and what we could accomplish with what we're getting through the sinking fund. So, most of those projects would be coming off the table. So definitely there would be that impact on learning. The big thing that stands out to me with technology, again, we spent nearly $30 million over the last 7 years getting mobile devices, strengthening our fiber network, doing those things, buying copiers. And unfortunately, those aren't things that last forever, so that we are in need of replacing those. And so if this bond didn't pass, we would be at a loss how we would get that technology needed into our students' hands. And with this being the window, again, we would have the debt falling off, so the levy would be lowered. So what we'd be able to accomplish, even just a few months down the road, if we were to go out to November, would be much smaller amount than what we'd be able to do now. So that's why this just it was the kind of perfect window for us to go, and why we're bringing it forward to you tonight.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Francis. I was able to see everyone now. Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you, Mr. Centers. I think definitely there is a need, and I want to commend the group that has put the presentation together, because I think it addresses especially the fiscal responsibility that we have. And we do know that there are projects that we do need to complete. We need to finish. There will always be projects, but the fact that we aren't asking for new tax or new money, I think now is the time to really go out for this bond. And there are definitely, I see great items on this list, and I really am looking forward to the future projects and what we can accomplish with some of those projects that will directly enhance our students, especially the STEM, the Project Lead the Way, and the robotics. Those are items that students are most involved in, and I think we can expand upon. So I think that's a great improvement to do. And again, everybody's talked about technology. Gee, the bond started in 2013. That equipment is now really needing to be turned over. So it's amazing. And I think we need to really educate our community to let them know that these technology items, they don't last. They're only meant to last 5 or 6 years, and we have to turn them over. So there is a great need for continuing with our technology projects. And also, I do like the idea of we have had a lot of discussion on getting our air conditioning in, and I really think the public is surprised. It's amazing. Some of the public doesn't realize that our buildings are really hot. When we have those really hot days, the classrooms are sweltering. So there is a huge need to get some air. I know it's a short term, we might not need it all the time, but it does open opportunities for summer programs and things like that. I mean, we could enhance some of our summer programs if we had the proper air conditionings in our classrooms, because a lot of times people will say, well, why don't we have year-round school, or why don't we do more summer programs? Well, it's just too hot. It's too warm. So this would give us an opportunity to possibly explore some of those avenues and using our buildings more year-round if we needed to. So I'm all for the bond. I think this is the time to go for it. And I really like the way this was laid out, the proposal, and the how you really addressed our needs and being fiscally responsible. Thank you.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. I think for me, some of the big issues that we're dealing with here are some of the programs that we're going to be able to add and enhance in our district. With the last bond series, we were so far behind on our buildings. We really focused on our main K-12 buildings. And we didn't go much farther beyond that with updating some of our other programs. I think for me, the enhancing the early childhood centers, we talk about with the third grade reading bill and some of these other things where, our kids, we have the idea that in the US, our kids are behind in their education. Reading is one of the most important things that we can do, and getting those kids into learning programs as soon as we possibly can get them in is a huge leap for our community. And the other end is the Career and Technical Center. I think we spent a lot of years, I know during my generation of college, everybody had to be college ready, and we've discovered that we're missing a huge opportunity with career readiness, especially in the trades. And we also have, and if anybody needs to expand on it, they can, but we have a couple of programs in the medical field and the criminology field that are just, the kids really want to take those, and we're limited on the number of students that we can have in those programs. And the robotics is just, that's an amazing program that I'm sure that we can, if we have the appropriate facilities, that can work into our daily education process as well. So I think being able to add on some new aspects for our community and start serving some additional needs in our community is a real plus for me. And I think one of the other things is utilizing our space appropriately. And with the media centers, we look back when we were kids on, what a media center or a library meant, and what that means now with all of the technology that we have, and the collaborative atmosphere that we have for, students and the staff. So I think reimagining some of those spaces and being able to update those and turn those into really positive, very useful spaces that fit today's education needs. So I'm very excited to see that we're going to be able to not only maintain our buildings, but also add, some great services and, update some of the spaces so that we can really get the most out of those buildings.
Great. Yeah, I think we saw a lot of really exciting concepts tonight, and there are things we've been talking about for a while. Some of it's new and exciting and updating our district, keeping things fresh, and evolving with the times, making sure that we can meet the challenges that our students today face and their students 5-10 years from now, and that's so important. We also have to recognize that Livonia was a post-World War II boom town, and a lot of our buildings are 60, 70 years old. And with that comes a little bit more work and maintenance than if they were built 10 years ago. They probably would have already had air conditioning. They probably would have had some other features that we don't already have. So, it's like we're a well-established community, and that's awesome. But along with that comes challenges like with having older buildings. So it is what it is. We're proud of our buildings. We work hard on them. We maintain them. But we want to make sure that they are evolving, that they are meeting the needs of our students. And I think a lot of thought has gone into the bond and doing that. It's really student-centered. That's one thing that, I do really appreciate when our administration, our board members have these discussions, is they talk about our students and what they can most need and most utilize, and what our community is really yearning for, and what will improve our community. So this has been a lot of work to this point. I know doing another bond is going to be a lot of work. We found that out through the first series, that it's a lot of X's and O's and execution, and just constant every week grind. But we see we've reaped the rewards of doing that bond with the significant improvements we've already had to our buildings. Over and over, we've heard a lot of things from the community, just how proud they are at the work we've done. And I think a lot of people will be supportive of this coming bond, knowing that the work that was done in the first series. I know I will be. I'm be very excited to support this bond, just knowing what it will mean for our district and our community. So again, thank you, everyone. Before we wrap it up, does anyone else have any more comments or questions? Mrs. Burnham.
Yeah, Paul Terrell is with us in our meeting tonight. Most of you see him on your screen. But for those of us who are intimately involved with the whole bond process of our last bond, you know this already. But for those in the community who may not be aware, Livonia Public Schools has worked closely with Plant Moran Cressa, because while we're experts in educating students, Plant Moran Cressa are experts at bonds and facilities and making certain that we can spread our dollars as far as we possibly can when we're making improvements to 23 or more buildings at a time. We have found a great return on our investment with working with Plant Moran Cressa. It's one of the ways that we have been financially responsible to our community. Working with Paul and the team at Cressa has allowed us to take advantage of economies of scale, take advantage of putting together a book of standards from the very beginning of our 2013 bond so that we have continuity in our district, which also saves us money in terms of purchasing things in a larger scale, replacing things that are consistent across the district when need be. But working with Cressa has saved us a great amount of money and time so that the folks who are in Livonia Public Schools can continue about the business of educating our students, while our partners at Cressa are acting as the owner's representative right alongside Livonia Public Schools, making sure that we have the best opportunities to make good decisions with the dollars that have been entrusted to us. So I'd like to thank Paul and the entire team at Cressa. It's been wonderful working with you, and I certainly hope that we continue doing that. I hope this bond passes. I believe that it likely will. Livonia residents are generally very supportive of our school district, and I know when we went out prior to the last bond, our residents, we went to our residents first and said, "Tell us what you need to know before making this decision." And very clearly across the board, it was, we're supportive of our schools, but we need to know what you need and why you need it and how much it's going to cost. So that's what we're trying to do, beginning with a few meetings ago, explain what we need, where we left off with the last bond, what our current needs are going forward, why these are important and worthwhile of investing. And the best part of this one, as we said, and how much it's going to cost is no increase over what we've had in the past on our tax bill. So I just think it's a very, very positive thing for everybody involved.
Yeah, just what you said something there, Mrs. Byrne, that kind of triggered something in my head. And our district, when we went and did the first bond, we knew ahead of time that everyone was going to get fresh tile and paint and renovations. And but the care that the folks in Cressa in our cabinet team who really ran a lot of these projects took, that each school had say, and really you can go around to each school, and while the renovations are alike, they really do keep the character of the school, the community. They are branded to those individual schools. A lot of times you'll see furniture and things that are different from school to school because schools decide that they utilize it differently. So we're going to touch every building with this upcoming bond, but I know that we're going to have very specific conversations with our leadership, our folks in the schools, to make sure that while we're doing a lot of the same things at every building, it's really going to fit each building, and so that everything's really utilized the best, and really the character of our buildings are kept the way they are. So anyone else with any more comments? All right, very exciting. Next steps, Mrs. Oquist.
Yeah, thank you. I was actually just going to invite Mr. Terrell if there was anything he wanted to add.
Yeah.
I know you worked closely with us on both the long-term facility plan and this planning process. If there's anything you want to share, you're welcome. If not, we'll get to the next steps.
No, I'd just like to, I guess, add in, I think it's a very exciting project. You know, as always, the district striking a good balance between needs and fiscal stewardship. And as always, we're very honored and proud to serve the district in whatever way the board would like us to. So definitely exciting, and looking forward to helping if we can. So
Thanks, Paul. So, Mr. Centers, we would request that this be placed on the regular agenda for next week. The process would be the board would vote on the resolution to accept the ballot language, and for us to send that ballot language to the clerk. That has to be done by February 9th in order to be included in the May 2021 election. So our process would be to go for a vote at our regular meeting next week. Once the board has made that determination, if they vote in favor and support that, then we would then send that ballot language, which has been approved by our legal counsel, to the city clerk, and we would be on the ballot for May. And at that point, we would begin on Tuesday with a very detailed informational campaign that will take place daily throughout the next several months.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Oquist.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Johnson, that concludes building and site for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. I just want to go back to our item 3, finance. We did not indicate, but are we putting that on the regular agenda for Monday? The school of choice? I see Mr. McDonald indicating yes. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Bonifield. Then that will take us to item 5, our curriculum committee, and Mrs. Jarvis.
Nothing.
Nada. Okay. Thank you. Then that takes us to item 6, our policy committee, Mrs. Burton.
We have nothing for this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. That'll take us to item 7, our personnel committee, and our chair, Mrs. Acosta.
Nothing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. That'll take us to item 8, our legislative committee, Mrs. Bradford.
Well, I have to say, nothing on this committee tonight on the agenda.
All right.
Wait a minute, I see Mrs. Oquist.
Not so fast.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford. I just had one announcement item, and I wanted to congratulate Mr. Centers, who is now the newest board member on the Michigan Association of School Boards. So he represents a group that represents large districts within the state. And so we are very proud to have him continuing to represent Livonia Public Schools, but now also representing on the Michigan Association of School Boards. So for many years, I have thought that a member of our board being on that board would be outstanding because of the exceptional nature and the work that you do. So Mr. Centers, congratulations. And we're really honored to have you representing us both here and in Lansing.
Thank you. I'm excited to get started with them.
Enjoy those meetings, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Oquist.
I think that's it then. Is anybody else? I think we're done for legislative.
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford.
Well,
that then brings us to the end of our agenda tonight. So I'm going to say good evening, and we will see you all next Monday at our regular meeting. So good evening.